What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today we'll be discussing the Connive mechanic, which was introduced in Streets of New Capenna. Connive is an interesting ability that states when a creature connives, and that creature's controller draws a card, discards a card, and then if the card that was discarded is a non-land card, you put a +1/+1 counter on the creature that connives. It's interesting because the ability is affecting the player. The player's drawing the cards and discarding the cards. However, the creature is the one that is actually conniving. The creature is tied to the ability. That said, if a connive trigger goes on the stack, but the creature that is then killed with targeted removal, say, you still get to draw the card and discard the card. However, there's nothing to put the +1/+1 counter on. Therefore, that part of the trigger does not resolve. So that's something, or it fizzles. And we're gonna, so for example, there's Echo Inspector here. It is a 2/3 for 4 with flying that says when it enters the battlefield, it connives. It's very straightforward. This enters the battlefield, you draw a card, discard a card, and if you discard a card, it comes into play with a +1/+1 counter on it, or after it connives, it gets a +1/+1 counter on it. So it would be a 3/4 in that case. So this is potentially a 3/4. Now, the interesting part about connive is you need to be very careful. It's a very skill testing mechanic because those +1/+1 counters seem nice. However, you need to be aware of the board state that you're looking at and be aware of your hand, because if you're discarding cards that are valuable in your graveyard, potentially reanimation targets, cards with flashback, cards that you can interact with later depending on the cards in your hand, like if you have a Raise Dead effect that takes a creature from your graveyard into your hand, hopefully attached to some more value. But if you have an effect that does that, discarding a creature to a connive effect might be a wonderful way to get a counter onto one of these things, and get a larger body on the field that can tangle immediately, and that's important. Whereas you can get some other value out of the card in your graveyard later, so that's nice. So when you're conniving, check the battlefield to be aware of how valuable the +1/+1 counter is. That makes a huge difference. Also, because you may want, late in the game, it may still be valuable to just chuck your lands to this so that you do not lose valuable resources in your hand. However, if the creature just needs to be bigger to get in for a couple extra points of damage, especially in a case like Echo Inspector here that has evasion with flying, that's very, very important. There are also cards in New Capenna that have other creatures connive, like almost on behalf of someone. Like Rafine, the guild leader of the Obscura, actually says when a creature attacks, it gets to connive. Or kind of multiple times, I believe. Let me pull that up. So Rafine says whenever you attack, whenever you, the player, send attackers in, the target attacking creature connives X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. So you actually get to draw X cards and discard X cards, and then put a +1/+1 counter on it for each discarded card. If a card simply says it connives, you connive 1. In this situation, you get to connive multiple times. So you got to be aware of that, and you need to make sure, again, that you are leveraging your hand for the best situation on the board. I personally want to take advantage of connive to fill my graveyard. I think loot effects like this are incredibly valuable when you have effects that can leverage the graveyard, either by becoming online once you reach a certain criteria, like Threshold, which is an ability that says if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, some additional effect happens when you cast spells. Great. There are also cards that, if they're in your graveyard, impact the board in certain ways. Like there are older cards such as Wonder that says if it's in your graveyard and you control an island, all of your creatures get flying. Like things like that want to go into your graveyard. So when you're conniving, depending on the format you're in, these will vary, of course, but when you're conniving, be aware of that. The cards in your hand, do you want them in your hand or do you want them in your yard? That's going to make a big difference on whether or not they're worth discarding to connive. Definitely keep that in mind. The other thing that you just need to be aware of is how big are your opponent's creatures and how big do my creatures need to be in order to tangle with them. When I say tangle, I just mean like get in combat, either attacking or blocking, and make a relevant impact. So connive is a very interesting mechanic. I believe it's a very skill intensive mechanic, and it's one that as of this recording, I have not had an opportunity to try out, and I'm looking forward to it very, very much. So be careful with your connives. Do not be afraid to discard lands to your connive, because if you are discarding cards, if you are discarding non-land cards, you are giving up resources. Be aware of that. and make sure to juggle that correctly and effectively. It may be difficult at first, but once you get the hang of it, I believe it's going to be okay, and you're going to do a fine job. So this is also the Obscura mechanic. I forgot to mention that. So if you're in Esper, white, blue, and black, you will see this mechanic come up, and with a number of different things triggering it. So thank you so much for checking out the video. I appreciate you. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I look forward to seeing you on the streets of New Capenna. Thank you so much. Have a great day.